Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Obscure Arc. We are here for our shared watch of the month, and we're here to talk about Millennium Actress. I'm here with my co-host, Emery. How you doing?
Good, not too shabby. Kind of interested to dive into this conversation of Millennium Actress. But yeah, this is, as far as our movie picks, I feel like was a pretty solid pick.
We've been doing a lot of movies recently. I will say, going on to talking about the topic of obscureness again. Not the most obscure. Satoshi Kon's one of the most well-known anime directors in the world, but it's not his most popular work. I will say, when you think of Satoshi Kon, most people, at least that I'm aware of, tell me of Perfect Blue first, then Paprika, and then Tokyo Godfathers, even before Millennium Actress. It's one of his more, in his recent works, more recent as in his last works he had before he passed away, unfortunately, was the one that was most skipped on upon, which I actually think it's quite enjoyable, but it's definitely a bit less of his pace when you see specifically Perfect Blue and Paprika.
Okay.
Actually, I don't remember. Have you seen either Perfect Blue or Paprika?
I haven't seen Perfect Blue.
Oh, you haven't seen Perfect Blue? Really?
I have not. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you definitely have to see Perfect Blue.
As much as I've heard and relatively consumed Satoshi Kon, I haven't seen Perfect Blue. I know, or I have a lot of friends that are big fans of his movies in general and him as a director. But yeah, like I've mentioned in previous episodes of our podcast before, I did not necessarily have the best movie experience going into anime, so I kind of looked to some, like, I guess you could say, must movies and just continued my life with shows.
Sure, yeah.
So
for me, I try to watch as many anime movies as I can. I did not watch Millennium Actress because I kind of was told Perfect Blue, Paprika were the big ones, and then I eventually watched Tokyo Godfathers. I've not seen Paranoia Agent yet, which is the show that Satoshi Kon wrote and directed. But yeah, Millennium Actress, out of his big ones, I think he has some earlier works that are less popular. That or the short films, I can't remember. But Millennium Actress was the one I was missing. And I was finally glad to get to it, which is very Satoshi Kon, even if it's less high stakes per se than his other films. But to talk about the details of Millennium Actress was made by Madhouse in September of 2002. Madhouse, household name, we've talked about them before, has done Hunter x Hunter 2011, Death Note, Frieren, Girl Who Leapt Through Time, Orb on the Movements of Earth, Chihaya Furu, Hajime no Ippo, and Perfect Blue. It was produced by Bandai Visual, WOW, Genko, Kanagawa Shoten, Clockworks, and Chaos Union, but was licensed by 11 Arts and DreamWorks. I believe the DreamWorks one was a Western, not localization per se, but it was a release in the West, whether it was both. I'm not sure if there's a dub of this actually, but I know for a fact that it was released in American theaters at some point. This is an original of Satoshi Kon's, basically all of his movies and all of his shows are. Satoshi Kon is the writer, but screenplay was done by Sadayuki Murai. The sound director of this is Masafumi Mima, who, like I've been talking about this whole podcast for this month, has been a lot of household names. He's done Attack on Titan, My Hero, Full Metal Alchemist, Original, Perfect Blue, Hajime no Ippo, Chihaya Furu, Initial D, Kuroko no Basket, and most recently for us, Pluto. So a ton of the big sound directors being covered this month. Music has been done by Susumu Hirosawa, and I couldn't find a ton of things, but they did do Berserk, like all of it. Like every single iteration of Berserk, I kind of double checked to make sure was done by Hirosawa. So,
okay,
pretty big work to have done. He's also done Paprika and the other Satoshi Kons, as well as Detonator Orgon, but his big thing is Berserk.
Okay.
Yeah, in all its prettiness and not so prettiness. for the animation specifically.
Well, yeah, visual is one thing, but like sounds a whole other beast.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, just how the, more so about the reception of the Berserk adaptations.
Which is,
yeah.
I understand, yeah.
As mentioned, the director is Satoshi Kon, known for Perfect Blue, Tokyo Godfathers, Paprika. I believe he has other works, but ultimately those are the big three, and then four if you include this one.
Yep.
You can watch this on HBO Max, Pluto, even in theaters, or arguably you could maybe find a place to rent it if those places still exist. Honestly, because it's a movie, there's a lot of options, or other ways, as always. To talk about Millennium Actress, for me, I notice a lot when people talk about cinema. They really mean Hollywood, and they often mean a very certain genre or certain genres in Hollywood. Millennium Actress is Satoshi Kon's love letter specifically to the history of Japanese cinema and his own style of filmmaking. I think that's such an important thing of that show the diversity and more so the specificity of Japanese cinema is really cool. I think that's a large part of what makes Millennium Actress so personal, because it is about filmmaking. It's, we detest a film made for the sake of talking about filmmaking, but it is about filmmaking. And the more and more I get into the film world, the more I appreciate it for sure. But it's definitely a bit, it's like a writer writing a story about a writer. It's a bit contrived. But it, comes with its very classic, Satoshi Kon staple of the mix of reality and unreality, and how it all seamlessly blends as the life of Chiyoko Fujiwara, a renowned actress. The setting is more or less Japan, but it progresses over time contextually in the historical context. It's a reimagining of Japanese history. I was at first questioning myself. I'm like, do I not know Japanese history? And then I kind of looked away. I was like, wait, no, this is slightly reimagining the progression over time. In terms of the art and production value, if you have nostalgia or memories of the 80s and 90s animation, you'll really enjoy it. The color palette stays primarily muted. I mean, for good reason. It's a lot of about memories, and it's primarily trying to complement that theme. As someone who enjoys, 80s and 90s animation, I would not say I'm nostalgic of it. So I think while it looks good, I'm not necessarily like blown away or seeking it desperately. I'm just kind of like, it's nice to go back here occasionally type of thing.
Yeah.
We very rarely get, I think we rarely get something this calm when we go over. I think Horimiya was a relatively calm show in general, but even then it has melodrama. But I think the way that we get into Millennium Actresses, I think overall, especially for Satoshi Kon, this is a very calm story. And one could argue it's less of a story, even more about an experience. Like, it gets into the roller coaster eventually, but I think how it starts is very much about the, a time gone by, right? Like, that's a very large feeling that we get. And I'm curious as to whether that hooked you or not, because for me, I was a bit hesitant to get on the ride per se, just because whenever I see these films made about filmmaking, I'm always like, oh boy, am I here just to self-indulge myself and really, be a part of that conversation? But, while I enjoy it, I was definitely a bit like hesitant. I think a big thing that was sold for me was Genya as a character. It becomes very likable, but I was a bit hesitant at first.
Yeah, no, for me, I feel like I was more on board from the get-go. I do not necessarily have like a specific opinion about movies, about filmmaking or stuff like that. And I truly don't have an opinion. It's not necessarily like I like it or I don't like it. It's just I don't have any biases. That being said, I'm not gonna like sit here and pretend like I was hooked from the first second where my dude Genya was watching the movie before the first earthquake happened, but I'd say the moment they started conversing with basically Chiyoko at our house, and when I guess we could say, get to see the first flashback moment, that's when I was like, okay, now I'm more invested.
I actually
Um,
had to rewind. I was like, did I miss something when they started the first flashback? I was like, is there like some power transition? I'm like, oh no, she's just literally telling her story and they're experiencing it.
yeah,
And that's the whole gimmick, is that we're not going to necessarily address that this is like, it's not some supernatural thing, and it's just kind of like it's more of a play per se
yeah, and
to the
we
audience.
we we do notice. For one thing, I do like that kind of storytelling in animes, pretty much. So we notice that a lot in more modern shows like Bacano, or uh, even a better example to that, which is uh almost like a child to Bacano, Durarara. So shows like that goes into sudden like flashbacks and like storytelling in that way, I do enjoy them. And for me it was like a really good, like, getting into the mood of like the roller coaster you just mentioned. So from there on, which I feel like we get there within the next like 10 minutes, I was pretty interested on what the experience would turn out to be.
I mean, I'll say I wasn't actually that sold within like the first 20 minutes or so, primarily just
Mhm.
because for me, Chioka as a character, I hate to say this about Satoshi Kon because it sucks because he passed away and he's also an incredible talent. But like low key, when I see Chioka as a character, and it's a woman who meets a guy and then who's older than her, obviously has to be like, she's like a teenage girl, and or like maybe slightly younger than teenage girl, meeting like a man probably in his like 30s and 40s. And then apparently she's fallen in love with him within like that happening, and now it's her life goal, and she needs to be there for him. It's a bit misogynistic, I won't say. Like it's a bit misogynistic. And then Perfect Blue being about the delusions of a woman, but they were real delusions, they were fair and all that. But like in general, he's leaned to slightly misogynistic writing here and there. Uh, it definitely was like,
Mhm.
oh god, this again. But I think the thing that makes Satoshi Kon movies work is what he consistently does is really good flow and movement, and a lot of it primarily comes from his transitions. A lot of people think transitions, a lot of times that are really interesting, are match on action transitions, which are nice, and he definitely does them, but he has this understanding of flow of whether it needs to be a transition that comes from the dialogue. Does it come from like a J cut? Does it come from someone saying something similar? Does it come from a character doing a match on action that's not just like two similar frames, but them like turning around? How does the scene flow? Like he has such a deep understanding of like the editing that needs to happen in a film. And I was talking to you about this a little before in our earlier conversation, but like Millennium Actress had to be a film, and it is a film, and it's not
It
anything
is.
else. It
Yeah.
cannot be a storybook. It cannot be like, it cannot be a play. It cannot be all these other things, because it's about, not only is it about being a movie, but it's also about, specifically, movies are temporally told, right? And
Yeah.
everything comes in order, and nothing, and it can't be unwound once it's in that way.
Yeah, we were talking about this previously, on our own conversation, but like sometimes you watch a movie and it feels like there's not enough screen time in general, or there's too much of it. And with Millennium Actress, I truly felt like once the movie was finished, it was like the perfect like duration it had to be. Everything Satoshi Kon wanted to tell for that story was told,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no like holes or missed beats that left me craving. I was truly satisfied with what was presented to me as a movie. And I really do feel like that's not a very often feeling, especially nowadays, that we get from movies. Especially in a time and era where we get a lot of movies as just connection points for series and shows and stuff like that.
Yes, when we've destroyed the anime movie genre by making it just shonen cash cows, yeah.
Yeah. So, with that being said, I was thoroughly pleased by how the whole presentation of this movie went down. For the let's get into a bit more what happened during the movie. for the art department and specifically the usage of different art styles throughout the movie, the transition between the different art styles, I really enjoyed that specifically. If anything, like, sure, there could be more character driven, interesting points for the movie, which is not necessarily like a Satoshi Kon approach, anyways, but like how he connected piece to piece throughout the whole movie, how smooth it was really like a joyful experience for me.
Yeah, I said this in conversation to you earlier, but like the discussion about how the philosophy of like how I'm very character driven as a person. If I were to say, Satoshi Kon, you need to write your characters better, he would say, I'm not interested in doing that. Which is very clear, like in how he writes his stuff. I am of the disagreement that even though that I think his flow is really important, he only has time for so many things. He could just write better in certain moments, but his ability to understand flow and time is immaculate, and not something that anyone, very few, and especially in the anime space, have even captured remotely close to. And yeah, he has this ability to understand his motifs and themes very well and incorporate them onto the screen and his storytelling flawlessly. Like, I think the unsaid things about how an actress is remembering her life and confounding both her memories and her acting performances kind of as the same thing says a lot about kind of like how important they are to her. And I think that kind of unspoken like how, because of how the storytelling is being done and creating that unspoken message very easily, I think it just shows mastery in like the entire movie. I mean, another thing is just like, as you mentioned, like the changing in art styles is also just part of the evolution of Japanese cinema, right? Like this is very clearly a movie that is a love letter to Japanese cinema. He loves the origins of Japanese cinema and how it's kind of changed from like, you know, the Showa kind of stuff to eventually gets all the way to Godzilla near the very end. And the evolution of not only that, but just kind of the culture of cinema. Like, to be fair, he has his gripes with it. He does not love everything about cinema, but he also understands it's like something that is a large part of who he is, as well as the Japanese culture as a whole. Like a lot of the, you know, any culture is built upon the arts, and cinema has become a large part of the artistic space, and like how it's developed into being like how we, you know, perceive our history sometimes is now seen through like, well, you remember this movie that was like a historical like, you know, this, you know, depiction of it. And I think that is part of it, of just like seeing Chiyoko play all of these really impactful roles of like, I mean, Genya being the ultimate fanboy shows it a lot, where it's kind of like, this is how I see things, is because I saw it through her, and she's ageless and timeless because the roles she played were like that. And it's so cool to see the amount of passion that's put into just the ideas of what is Japanese cinema, rather than, you know, it doesn't have to be the characters. Like I don't think it has to be the characters all the time for me to really care about it. My only real criticism related to the characters is, as I mentioned, like, you know, you can't just write better. And also, if I want to dig, I do like to be able to dig. And I think Chiyoka, Genya, and even Eiko, the shrewd actress, don't have enough that I care to dig. And so it's very much, this then lays the story to be more of a experience and a great ride, but a lot less of a story that I can dig to and relate to characters and learn something about myself. There's definitely not a lot of self-reflection in this type of movie.
Like in terms of layers, it's definitely not a show that picks attention with how many layers or how deep you can go in terms of layers to it. It's most definitely more of a theme / visual art piece than like this extremely intricate storytelling piece. But that being said, was there still elements of the storytelling that I enjoyed a lot? There actually were. Which one of them would be how Genya got connected to Chiyoko's life through the flashbacks we see, and like at first, like something that seemed like just a fanboy type of attitude from Genya, in time kind of resolved into him actually being a part of her life at some point, and not just like some far distant fanboy. Like he very much is a fanboy, but it's not just like him admiring her from afar from movies and all. It's like we get to see him actually being on the set, being on the working for the film company Chiyoko was signed to and all that stuff, and how towards the end, and this is kind of getting into pretty heavily spoilers section, even influencing her life and basically saving her life, all that stuff. I felt like that was really tastefully done and didn't necessarily feel rushed or forced.
It didn't feel rushed. It's a little forced because he wanted to keep the cast small, and it's like, oh, I guess he saved her life, and like, I think him being involved is one thing. Him saving her life, I was like, whoa.
Saving her life part could be considered as forced. I get that, but it's also that like the always threatening earthquake situation with Chioka, and like
Here's the thing, it's forced, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's not necessarily forced, as in like there's no, like if you wanted to have an explanation to why that's the case, you have enough content at your hand to explain it.
It's definitely still forced, and like it definitely is like we need to give something to attach to her. Here, he saved her life. Does it matter? Not really, because I think Genya's relationship to her, I think more so the most important about Genya's relationship to her is how much he cares about her career, and how like I think my favorite scene is when they're both like, they get snapped out of reality, or like the memories, and they're just kind of like, oh, she's riding a horse, and no, he's like in a mask, and the guy's just like, what, Ida is kind of just like, wow, I'm with two idiots who are just reenacting. But it's more so about how invested he is in her life that I'm interested in, and not only her life, but the history of cinema. And like the whole reason they're doing this documentary is it's a celebration of cinema and of like, you know, Japanese cinema, and something that I think people who don't know about much film history that are now in a time gone by is that actresses and actors used to be signed to like exclusively work for studios, and studios used to be like, hey, we have this lot and these sound stages, and we're going to shoot here, and we're going to shoot these things, and we're shooting with these same actresses all the time, and they're going to be stars and the big stars. And that has changed, especially in Hollywood over the past, like, you know, few decades, where we no longer have that, you know, star system in the same way. We have a star system still, but not in the same way, not with studios in the same way, and often shooting on location in different places. But this is saying goodbye to that era. That really is part of this, is saying goodbye to the star system and how we used to see it. And a big thing that Genya is so big on is, you know, how timeless she is and how timeless her films are. And it's because when you are part of the founding father kind of like part of filmmaking, no matter how the quality of the film is, because it's like people's first time seeing these images and stories being told in this manner, it's important to people. And it's like, am I going to pretend like the Maltese Falcon is the most riveting, incredible piece of media of all time? No. But the Maltese Falcon is really important. And, you know, it's like how we talked about Akira. Like, it's when you see something being done in a certain way for the first time, it's really important, and it opens up people's perspectives. And that kind of filmmaking was, and, you know, that type of exposure to films through the specific studio system was really important to people. And losing that, again, a big thing is that the loss of it, not only through the literal destruction and bankruptcy through an earthquake, but also because it's no longer in that era, right? We're no longer, we're beyond that time. And there's definitely a certain sorrow to it, like, you know, with the ending and Chioka kind of moving on, but also staying stuck to her pursuit of her one goal.
Which is why I'd also like kind of liked the addition of like constant earthquakes in the story.
It's a very Japanese thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is a very Japanese thing. But, well, I guess back when this was released, it was less, it was used as a subject less than what it is today, considering this was back 25 years ago, basically. But like the addition of earthquakes and kind of giving that uncertainty to characters and their living, their life. And again, that actually towards the end, directly attaching to Chiyoko was, in my opinion, a nice touch as well. Because at first, like, when we see the opening and Genya's watching the movie, and there's just like a random earthquake, the first reaction is just like, oh yeah, it's Japan. Like they have earthquakes. But then further down the line, it keeps happening and happening. And like Chiyoko kind of giving that hint of information about her, and always like even her being born during an earthquake, all that stuff, kind of making us connect what's obviously Japanese in a more personal level as well was kind of, like, it's not something I was like, oh wow, it's crazy, but it was like, okay, that's a nice touch. And that's why I also kind of mentioned, like, since there's always earthquakes and problems happening around her, him saving her is not necessarily the craziest thing either. It's definitely intentional, where like they wanted a reason, but at least they gave us, if we actually thought why that would happen, then like just putting, like, as in, I'm just trying to say that, like,
Okay, you're not. I will say you're not going to convince me that there's not some level of force. To be fair,
it's forced. I'm just saying, like, the way they do it is different. So let me just put it like this, right? If there was just one earthquake and it was that scene, and in that scene he saved her, that would be much harsher on the palate than what it is now, is what I'm trying to say. Everything is, in a sense, whether it's less or more, it's thought out, which I enjoyed. And it helped, that being not that hard on the palate helped of me actually enjoying the whole ride of the movie.
Honestly, that part of the movie does not matter to me at all. Like,
I
am so, like, when Genya saves her, I'm like, cool, and it does not feel like it adds a ton. Not that it's a bad thing, but it flows fine, I guess. But
that's literally what I'm trying to get at, though, because it's not that harsh on the palate. It let me enjoy the whole thing.
No, but like you're saying, because it wasn't bad, it's fine and it able to work. My whole thing is of just like,
no, I'm saying if it was that bad, I would be taken out from the experience.
No, but genuinely. My point is, you're not saying it like as a positive. You're saying, well, this forced part wasn't bad, so it's fine. But I'm like, yeah, but it could have been slightly better done. Not that it's a big deal either way, or not that it's a big deal that it's being whatever. But I'm just kind of like, it's like, it's a point in this movie that I was like, it's like, in comparison to the rest of the entire movie, that scene is so inconsequential, where I'm like, it is a moment where it's like kind of getting to the end of her life. And I honestly, the part that's more forced and worse is when she just throws her helmet down and runs away. I was like, yeah, it's even more forced. I'm just kind of like,
that was wild.
It's like, yeah, I know she's like feeling trapped in this escape feeling, but it doesn't feel like it actually builds to it that well.
That did actually took me out of the movie, though.
Yeah, I actually don't think that it builds to it the best. Again, the biggest problem with Chiyoko as a character is her journey as an actress. I'm interested. I care, even though she, I think, doesn't fully delve into the craft. She is still a great actress. My actual biggest problem is that it's using a large crutch on, we'll say, love. It's not exactly love, but like this idea of love as the crutch of specifically for a woman, and how they oftentimes make this a very misogynistic type of thing. But it's just like, you don't need to be told more. Like, the idea of, if she's in love with a man, of course she's going to chase him to the ends of the earth. We don't have to write more details. You get it. And I think that's generally poor writing when you do something like that and you don't show it in a way. It's kind of like you give yourself like legit like less than a minute explaining that, and I'm just like, cool, great. I know that it's not really love, and it's more about the pursuit, and to some extent about this feeling of home in Japanese cinema, or the thing that she was pursuing, whether it wasn't exactly artistry but something beyond. I think that ultimately it all feels, it's a bit chaotic because of how underwritten the actual pursuit part of her career is, and her pursuit for the key, and the whole thing is that gets later revealed. Spoilers, we've already kind of talked about spoilers, but larger spoilers is that the man was dead for a while now.
I'd say, like, just kind of also including the why I approach the earthquake scene the way I do as well, is that watching movies like this, that, for example, this movie Millennium Actress being Satoshi Kon's like second movie ever, or something like that, if I'm not wrong, because he does Blue Paradox, Perfect Blue,
Perfect Blue.
before this, and then this is literally after that second movie. Like, I usually view a lot of these movies as them kind of also improving, like, as in, this is obviously a movie that, which we're dissecting right now and kind of talking about flows, but also I consider the fact that like we did for Angel's Egg, this is a really early example of Satoshi Kon's work, which then shows me how he become who he become further down the line.
Okay, but the difference is that Satoshi Kon was with Madhouse on his first production. Actually had a really large budget, and I believe he had at least short films before this. So I could be wrong, but I don't. You say that in a sense like you were like worried that it was gonna be like, I don't know, bad or something per se, because like, I don't know, like if you've seen Perfect Blue is like, oh, this guy has talent.
No,
the first...
I'm not saying that as in I was worried about it being bad. I'm saying it in the sense that why I'm taking certain things as like, okay, it didn't take me out of the experience, so it's not necessarily the worst thing kind of approach. Whereas like in a more modern anime, or if let's say we did a newer movie of Satoshi Kon, I would be like, okay, at this point, if he's still doing this, like, that's a bigger problem.
I don't consider 2000 that old. That's my thing. I don't consider 2000 that old. And I
again,
think
it's not old as in like, I'm talking about the director's career. But that being said, that's strictly my approach. You obviously don't have to take that approach. But that's why when I talk about certain things, like, it didn't take me out, but the helmet throw certainly did. So there's like a threshold for me, if that makes sense, where like to a certain degree, if it's agreeable within the grand scheme of things,
yeah, of course,
I'm like, okay, like this is not the best thing, but I'm still within the moment. But when she starts screaming and throwing the helmet, at that point I vividly remember being like, okay, what the heck was that? I mean, that's like a threshold for me.
I mean, first of all, what I will say is that I think that I think you give discredit to anime movies in a really weird way, and like the lack of experience of specific directors. That's really, I don't know if I agree with that. But I
this is not discrediting anything.
Well, no, it's more so the perspective of like, oh, maybe it's a lowerness of standards. Maybe that's what it is. But
it might be like I wouldn't say it's acknowledging that people start their careers from a certain point. Thus, the movies they do early on their career, I tend to try to view them from a more positive standpoint than taking it as is and already given and like kind of bash them down.
No, well, my opinion is a story's a fucking story at the end of the day, whether it's your first or your 50th. I think like ultimately you do need to.
But you improve.
Yes, you do improve, but ultimately at the end of the day, you should be objective about it and not be like, maybe if you're saying how you're judging Satoshi Kon as a filmmaker, that's one thing. But it's another thing to be like, oh, well, it's his second movie. It's okay for it to be, this rough. I'm like, no, you should be critical and tell people that, like,
yeah.
I think I was talking to one of our coworkers about this, and he was like, one of the things that when Steven Spielberg made one of his like earlier movies, I think it was not even like release type of movies, but he was told like, this movie is a fucking waste of my time, because you're not trying to do anything. And I'm like, yeah, you should be told that at an early on age. I think that ultimately you should be given that harsh reality check of like whether your story is actually good or not.
Yeah, of course.
I think that the being told like, oh, it didn't take me out of the immersion that much. I'm like, no, it was a weaker part of the story. It's fine to tell someone that this part of the story was weaker.
Which is why I at the beginning, I agreed it is obviously a weaker part, but then I also added it was not as bad as the second scene, which took me out. Like, it's less so not acknowledging that it is a weaker side, but it's also acknowledging there are obvious more weaker sides. Thus, that was not the worst part. No, it's not. It could have been worse. There's literally existing worse parts to it right now. That's literally what I'm saying.
Okay.
And you obviously acknowledge the fact that there is, with the helmet example you gave yourself, like there are even worse parts in that movie. That's why. Like that's literally all I'm saying. So it's, I guess, ultimately it comes down to how we phrase it, I guess. Because it feels like we're kind of saying the...
I just want to make it clear that it's like, just because it was slightly more palatable than it could be, it was still a slightly forced, but not a big deal forced, and that is not something you should be having your audience think. Like, it is not a big deal in terms of, like, legitimately, I don't think it takes you out, like I said, but it's to Satoshi Kon's standard, and also just generally storytelling things, if I'm second questioning the fourth wall in that moment because of a decision you make, that's usually not a good thing. Because I'm just like, I could tell in that moment, I was like, everything's flowing so seamlessly. Oh, they needed a reason to implement Genya more. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm questioning this fourth wall. That's not a good thing. No matter what point you are in your career, anytime you're making the audience second question the fourth wall, that's a big problem.
I feel like this discussion differed this much just because what we experienced within the moment. So for me, I can definitely say that, like, I thought that scene popping up in my head afterwards, like after completing the movie and then going through the movie again. But since... and I know they're not the same thing, but since we saw Genya saving her, or I guess saving her, quote unquote, in other like scenes where like he comes as like a samurai or like a ronin and stuff like that, when he saved her in real life, in that instance, till I went back in my head, I didn't like got out.
Yeah, I mean,
on the helmet one, I did that. That's why I was, I guess, saying like it was that much different for me.
For me, it's like, yeah, him saving her and like him caring about her. I thought it was going to come full circle at the very end of the movie. It felt really weird that it was him doing it like as an unknown person to her. Not that it's like, oh, it's fine, you could be more of part of the loop. It did feel weird because it's like, they don't implement Genya that much, and they also implement Genya more as like an idea. A lot of the time, where it's like Genya is the person who cares about you, your supporter type person, but Genya doesn't have texture as a character, right? He's just the fan, right? He has some texture in the small moment where he's introducing himself of like, I was a nobody, I didn't even become a department head type person, but he doesn't become that much of a detailed character like throughout the entire thing. So it's hard for me to truly care about his revelation as someone who's like, going to be the quote unquote savior of Chiyoko. Like, again, when a character has less texture, it's hard for me to care. I'm only going to care about the experience. And when that experience made me kind of question the fourth wall because it felt the need to include Genya more, I'm just kind of like, ooh, when getting out of that flow state, even kind of for a second, not really, is more impactful in a movie like this where I don't have characters to rely on or something else to rely on in the story that I'm really engaged in. Like, if you're not engaged, like I'm engaged with the idea of like, a lot of this is about reality and memories and how we confound the two, as well as the celebration of Japanese cinema. But beyond that, you're solely really focused on a lot of that. There's not a ton. I mean, there's also the passage of time and, maybe the inevitability of time that's included. And, I get the idea of the pursuit
like
and
an
chase.
Inevitable end. And
there's like stuff like that related to it. But ultimately, these are all kind of similar-ish themes that I'm talking about here. When I'm talking about memories, it's related to time. But like, when you don't have that and then you try to get to your characters, or God forbid we talk about the narrative, like the narrative is more or less primarily exploring these themes. Like the narrative is about this flow state of just going through her life and memories. Like the plot is memories, like, right? That's the whole narrative. There's not much else beyond that other than, well, the studio shut down and we're here to visit her for her documentary. Like, there's not, after that, you kind of just keep going with her story and her stuff and all that chasing and whatnot. And I enjoy the second questioning and I enjoy all of that. But the second I spend some time and I'm go like, I sit down after the movie and I'm like, what else am I digging for? I'm kind of like, well, I kind of got everything I wanted out of this movie. well, maybe not wanted, but everything that I needed out of this movie. But I'm not getting much more than that. I'm kind of getting the
Yeah, that's also like kind of going back to the layer thing we talked about, right? So like usually when you watch some other shows or movies for that matter, when you think back on it, which I guess Orb would be a really good example of this, like you keep getting more and more from that. And like not even on the thought like rethinking about it perspective, but even if you were to do like think about it again and then go watch it one more time, you could even get more out of it. Whereas like you mentioned before, Millennium Actress really comes off as like a you sit there, you watch it, and that's basically what you get. And the more you think about it, you might actually notice some mistakes or not well done parts, and not necessarily like an additional like super deep understanding. Like you can certainly take out some themes or dig them a bit deeper, but it's very much how it presents itself is what it is kind of situation.
The most digging you can actually do in this show, which I've not done myself, is compare the sets to the influences that they were actually related to. So like, all of the, I can tell you all the movie names exactly that they were obviously influenced by, but these are, most of these movies have a direct real world, like, and I can't remember the actress's name, editor Jared will have on screen, but this is, Chiyoko's life was loosely based off of her life.
Yeah.
And you can, the comparing the art and the props and the styles and all that, that would be more so. But to me, you're not getting, it's more like oh, that's cool type of analysis, not really actual analysis of like, I'm learning and thinking and changing and doing things.
Almost like an Easter egg in a game.
Yeah, it's kind of
thing.
referential. Yeah. And it's, don't get me wrong, that's really important to the style and the love letter nature of this movie, but ultimately doesn't really make you dig. It's more so just like if you have a deep appreciation or a deep relationship to these films, you'll care about it even more, but it's not necessarily more complicated, it's just more intense, which is nice, but it's also not. I like to be able to really delve in and think and whatnot, and Millennium Actress is simply just not the movie for that, which it's not trying to be, which is fine. Yeah. I just am ultimately like, and I kind of knew that when I was going into it, because while I like Perfect Blue a lot, Perfect Blue is an experience, and if you try to dig with character stuff, and it says a lot about like specific things and themes, it's not about the characters. And it's never been about the characters with Satoshi Kon, and that's fine. But I think ultimately, I will always kind of have a certain hesitancy where I'll be like, he's a master at what he does, but do I agree with what he does? And I'm like, mostly. I think it's important to have people like Satoshi Kon. Yeah. And I think he definitely could have done better if, he had been with us longer. But I also think that my style of filmmaking, my things that I appreciate, is a bit more character focused, or at the very least going to have the layers and depth to make me care about even like, I would tell someone to watch Millennium Actress, but I would never tell someone to rewatch Millennium Actress. I think that's a large difference in how I feel about this, where I'm kind of like, I have, as much as I enjoy Perfect Blue, I think I would only do it to see if I remember it, I would never go back. Like a large part of this podcast for us rewatching is like, I want to go back actually and then just discuss themes, analyze, and do like for me it was a big thing where it's like, not only is it comfortable to watch, but I do love analyzing the scenes again, even though they're very basic. I don't have much I want to dig with this type of show. I'm kind of just like, yeah, it's good. I enjoy it, but it's like when you talk about 86, like 86 is the type of show where I'm like, if you told me we should go back and watch 86 right now and discuss it again, I'd be like, yeah, 86 has that much to give. But I don't think that Millennium Actress really encourages me to do that.
Yeah, no, I don't. Like, this is how we kind of started this whole Millennium Actress episode anyways, but it's definitely like a more visually like you just sit there, watch it, and enjoy what's in front of you, and then kind of continue your day kind of thing, which, like you said, it's not necessarily anything wrong. Actually, for me, I do enjoy character-driven stories a lot, but I also do enjoy like a just sit and enjoy the ride kind of experience. Like this movie.
I mean, one could argue this is more of like what cinema used to be like. I mean, cinema has moved, and storytelling in general, I would argue, has moved more towards character-based stuff, which I agree with. But a lot of characters back in the day were tropes on tropes on tropes.
Yeah, exactly. So on that regards, it's definitely like in terms of what it is, it's going to be more dependent on what the viewer's personal taste leans towards. And it doesn't mean that like yourself, that just because you enjoy character driven stories more, you can't enjoy this one. It's just a matter of preference, right?
Well, part of it does come to the fact that Satoshi Kon has a mastery of making this
Exactly.
work. If he didn't have a mastery of making this work, I think my criticisms would stick harder of how he should do things differently. But because his style and his flow and like the movie feels like almost one scene
Yeah.
going on forever, because he has that going on so well, it all works out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not like every work like this will actually make you appreciate it, like Satoshi Kon does. But for me, since I don't necessarily have a preference of like that specific storytelling or this specific storytelling wise, the way Satoshi Kon does his movies usually tend to make me enjoy my time. I certainly do agree with they're usually not movies that I'm inclined to go back and dissect and analyze and try to dig deeper, because they are very much you get what you get kind of experiences, very good ones at that, but it is what it is. Where you could do what you suggested with 86 or with Orb or with many other shows and movies out there. But ultimately, I feel like this is actually one of the movies that I personally enjoyed so far. Especially like, I do kind of want to give like a highlight to it, that specifically talking about the movies that we watched for the podcast.
I mean, we've watched some really mid ones, but we've also,
Yeah.
for me, the highest is still Your Name. I would
No,
say,
yeah, this isn't necessarily my highest. Don't get the wrong idea.
We've
It's
watched
just
some real
like
mid ones. The more I think about it, we've watched.
that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Like so within what we watched for this podcast, this is a movie that I did after finishing it was like, okay, like I actually did enjoy this much more than I thought.
Speaking of Your Name, I want to get your thoughts on the ending chase sequence. Your Name-esque, but more so we should be saying Millennium Actress-esque. But what did you think about that ending little chase sequence? Because for me, I was always like, I guess everything was supposed to come full circle. That was like a large part of this movie, is things coming full circle and kind of the, full circle, but then coming to an end type of thing. I thought it was a bit, not force is definitely the wrong word here, but it definitely felt a bit, maybe slightly indulgent per se, of the moment, because I think that I was not on board with Kyoko in that moment per se. Like I get why she did it and was like, oh, finally we know where he is and I'm gonna go chase him down. But I was kind of ultimately like, wasn't the point of this? I guess the point was to keep chasing. I don't know. It felt weird. I wasn't as connected with Kyoko in that very moment. I think that
like we're talking about the scene at the very end.
Well, she's chasing and then she gets on the bus and then she goes to the field and then she's like, boom, here we are. There's the painting. No, don't run away. Like, and then it leads to the ending of the movie and it's like we've come full circle type thing. It's not, for me, that whole sequence, I was kind of like, I'm not shocked that she didn't grow past it, or I think the feelings, I think my main thing is that her feelings never evolved in relationship to it. She just always was desperate. And maybe you could argue that's her childlike wants, and all that. But again, none of it's explored enough for me to really delve or care about it. I'm just
that was definitely like that was very much intentional so that it did come back as a full circle, like you mentioned. But yeah, I guess it was just expected to reach something of that sorts by the end of the movie. Where we would see that and then we would see the hospital bed resolution, and those two things would be the final things we, I guess, get. Do I think that's the best execution it could have been.
Well, it's actually less about the execution in terms of what they did, but more so about like
What it gave us as a story.
the stakes. I didn't actually care, like, because like you're kind of
Yeah.
once Chiyoko reaches the end of her movies, I don't really have, at least for me, I was never that pulled by the guy with the key because it's just like, oh,
Yeah,
the guy.
he's kind of, I think in regards to that, yes, it was like never felt that high stakes. And that's relatively why I was like, was that the best execution?
It just doesn't
Not
hit the crescendo.
necessarily,
You know what
yeah.
I'm saying? It doesn't hit
Because
when
it's literally a guy with the key, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, she's quotes unquote in love with him, but like the very first beginning, the relatively misogynistic part you mentioned,
Yeah.
I agree with that part fully because there's no substantial grounding. Like, if anything, if that part was more characterized for us, that could have changed the whole weight of the movie throughout the movie.
Mhm.
But because that's much more like, oh yeah, she tied a ribbon around his leg and then the dude literally escaped within the next 24 hours, you're like kind of
yeah.
low stakes.
I mean, for me, like when I'm comparing literally chasing
Kind
the
of
chase scene,
situation.
or chase, if you want to call it a
Yeah.
chase for your name, its foundation is built upon the whole I'm looking for something or someone. The
Yeah.
whole movie was building towards this logically. And while the narrative per se was building in terms of like, this scene needed to happen again because a lot of this movie is about coming full circle.
Yeah.
It felt like it was doing it because, and rather than, I don't understand the logical feelings that are chasing me to care about this, where I was just kind of like, yeah, I mean, she's going to go do this because I know she is, but
Which I guess it was also promoted throughout the movie that what she's doing is not necessarily logical, and it's
No.
actually like the curse of
Yeah.
a love for 1,000 years. But yeah, it certainly didn't hit as hard as it could.
like, because for me with your name, it's like a clear, logical, this is what we were doing the entire time. I was
Yeah.
like, good shit. And then when I see this, I'm kind of like, this was what you're doing, but I actually don't think you planned this. Like, it doesn't, the way you plan, in the end, it doesn't come to crescendo like it's supposed to, right? Because I think it's kind of supposed to. When I watch Perfect Blue, it comes to more of a crescendo than this even, because I think Perfect Blue, it gets so confounding and wild and crazy that it's like, yes, it hits the crescendo because this big thing's about to happen. But with this, I'm just kind of like, okay, we kind of knew this was going to happen, and there's nothing different about it than I thought it was going to be, and I'm not that attached anyways, so okay, it's
Yeah.
fine.
You would remember like earlier in the day when we were talking about the Millennium Actress, I said like this is like a roller coaster ride, but not as in it has highs and lows,
Yeah.
but more so like as a visual masterpiece. So
Yeah.
and I do kind of stand by that like critique that I've made. This show does not make you feel super high stakes, super highs and lows kind of things, where some of his other movies certainly do so. So
I think if at the very least, if this movie was going to go down this route a bit more, I think it leans less into being this cinematic thing and slightly more nostalgic. I think this movie,
For
while
sure,
being
yeah.
nostalgic in moments, and I think having good nostalgia, does have a focus on cinematic first, when I
Yeah.
think ultimately that was not the strength in this movie. I think Satoshi Kon has this need to always be cinematic, when in reality, I think a nostalgic, slower type of feeling, like comparison to like I think a movie that is like that is I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, a bit more like that actually would have been a bit smarter. Whether that involves time with your characters or not is up for debate, but
Yeah.
ultimately I think there's a way to be like, no, we need, how we build stakes is actually not about this big crescendo,
Yeah.
but more so about maybe a sorrow, a loss, something that feels like it's maybe slightly more draining, or a warmth. This movie's not very
like
warm in general.
more environmentally captivating.
Yeah, I will say this movie's warmth primarily exists in like the mid section, and in terms of what Genya and Chiyoko both love about her career. It's not very
Yeah.
warm in general, and I'm like, I know Chiyoko's supposed to be a bit tragic, but I'm like, I don't know, maybe you can give her a bit more. So it was just very all right with that.
Yeah,
part.
I'd say in a lot of movies, right? What what you experience while watching that movie is usually like certain emotions going through you, because they're kind of reminding you of those moments. Where in this one, it's mostly appreciation to the craft and not necessarily an emotion being, you know, triggered inside you.
Yes.
So
Satoshi Kon's the goat at what he does. I'm always just like, I don't fully agree with what he does, even if he's really fucking good at it and I enjoy it. Because I'm just kind of like, I mean, it's more so that it's good to have someone like Satoshi Kon doing what he's doing, but I'm always just like, is this indicative of what I think anime stories should be? I'm like, not exactly. So that's at least where I said.
With all that, I would totally agree that is Millennium Actress Satoshi Kon's best movie. No,
I don't think it's his best movie.
Is it worthwhile, in my opinion, to watch at least once?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
For sure, it's a worthwhile one. And again, throughout the movies we watched for this podcast, it's obviously not number one, but it would be maybe in my top 4.
We've only seen so many, but yeah.
Yeah. While watching literally like 3 back-to-back last time around, it kind of adds to the general number. But yeah, so ultimately, it's visually satisfactory to me. It's appealing. It did not necessarily act made me feel anything substantial, but did make me appreciate what's going on, and that's mostly it for me.
For me, the fact that it is so good at the playing around with the motifs and themes of like memories and time and reality and the things that Chiyoko cares about in her life, the fact that it plays around it so well and so masterfully, that is enough to sell me on the movie.
Yeah.
And I think it does a little bit more here and there with us, primarily the little bit of extra sauce to me is how much they care about, Japanese cinema and filmmaking, all that type of stuff that I enjoy. I'm always just, you should do more if you can. And I always think when I see moments of improvement, or like, at least in my opinion of things that are improvement that I see, I'm always like, hey, you should go do that. But for me, everything, like just the baseline of what it does is so high that, it's really great. I just think that there are things that I fundamentally disagree with, and I don't think that would ever change with me and Satoshi Kon.
Yeah, no, the themes are pretty strong. You're pretty right about that one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great ride, but I think as I'm always someone who looks more for stories and things I can dig myself into. So
yeah, but with all that, that's I think pretty much. What would you say? Like gathers all our thoughts about.
That's a wrap on Millennium Actress.
Yeah, Millennium Actress, and nonetheless, I feel like this was a pretty solid month for us.
Yeah, it's really good.
I enjoyed the shows, the movies, all the stuff. It did start a good conversation for all of them.
Yeah,
and it was pretty, like they were pretty good examples of what they represent. As genre and like with themes they have. So
yeah, we didn't talk about a ton specifically related to cinematic anime, and that's primarily because I don't like talking about it because it's this really sad reality that honestly
that is
if we weren't near the end of this episode, I would probably talk more about, but ultimately we'll definitely talk about it again at some point. Honestly, I would not be shocked if we talked about it next episode, but
because next episode.
Well, first let's talk about our seasonals. I do want to talk about seasonals and things we've seen very shortly. I've watched a couple of things. I've kept up with Freywin. Shockingly, we live in a world where making a season every like even 2 years for a show like Freywin is hard. And when you're trying to do a certain level of quality of animation, but people have a short attention span and need the show to come out all the time. Yeah, it's not going to be as covering as much material as maybe people like, or it's not going to be as. There's a lot of problems with season 2. Not like it's a big problem, but it's just like Freyrin is very clearly not getting as far as I would like as a narrative, and I've always been critical of this show. And if we ever talk about it in a more serious manner on this podcast, I'll go into more detail. But I'm always critical of Frieren because it's good on an individual level, but struggles to be a big story. I've probably said this a billion times, but what I have not talked about, and what I will talk about for sure at some point on this podcast, is Journal with Witch. Because holy fuck, am I in love with this show? I think Journal with Witch is it. It's for sure going to be my anime of the year, and I don't need to see the rest of the year. That's how good I think Journal with Witch is. I can say that like with large amounts of confidence because I think when I see a writer with sauce, like a lot of it, and like really knows how to write their characters, not only just write their characters, but really write and understand what their story is about, I get really jealous. Like I don't like, and I get mad. Like Journal with Witch, there's very few shows that have gotten me mad because of how good they are. March Comes in Like a Lion is one of them. And Journal with Witch is one of the others. There's probably a couple of others that I can't think off the top of my head, but this show has March Comes in Like a Lion level of quality to it to me. And when I say that, that is like one of the highest like comments of praise I can give a show. It's so good. It deals with grief. It deals with like it deals with grief, loss. It deals with becoming your own person, the uncomfortability about living with someone you don't know, just humanity and the human condition itself. Storytelling, it's so many things in such a short amount of time that I'm just like, wow, how do other people not write stories like this? And the reason why they don't write stories like this is because it's about a 35-year-old single novelist woman who's not exactly someone that you would see on the anime screen be successful. And it's a reason why this show is not popular. But it is incredible, and it is one of the best shows this season. And I've watched a little bit, it's the tiniest bit of Tamon's B-side. It's fine. It's if you want a fun little romance episode or like rom-com-y type episode for like, you know, a nice little hit, it's fine. But I've seen better. And it's enjoyable for what it is, but I've definitely seen better.
Okay. Pretty good selection there, or like a balanced selection of like really good, could have been better, okay, kind of the trio. For me, these are not necessarily like seasonals, but at least not all of them. But I did watch a decent amount of anime, which I am surprised myself as well, to be honest. But the first one is actually a seasonal. It's Sentenced to Be a Hero. I enjoy it so far. It's obviously not the most original, mind-blowing, oh my god, what did they do kind of show. It's
when I had people telling me that after I watched episode 1, I was like,
yeah, no, it's, as someone who watches shit ton of fantasy / isekai related anime, regardless of it being good or bad, I can 100% advocate that the ideas there are not necessarily original or like crazy innovative or whatever. Are they somewhat nicely balanced and well executed so far? Yes. Could they butcher it any moment? Yes, with any fantasy and anime.
on a knife's edge the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. It's always on knife's edge. But that being said, visuals are pretty good.
It's kept up?
Yeah, it kept up. Like you do get like a slight dip, but generally it's still pretty good. Music, sound, and obviously voice acting, they're pretty good. So it's gonna be a rememberable anime of its genre between all the, I guess, randomly generated fantasy / isekai animes. Another show that I watched is Bocchi the Rock.
We love Bocchi the Rock.
I really did enjoy this, actually. I found the humor really fun. It took out like big laughters out of me. And,
it's a really funny show.
Yeah, in multiple moments.
I actually tell people this all the time about Bocchi, that if someone I know doesn't like Bocchi, I probably shouldn't be their friend. Yeah. Legend, as someone who's an introvert, is also, I think, the exact style of humor of Bocchi. I fucking love the humor in Bocchi. If you don't laugh or you don't enjoy it or you're just like, it's weird, I'm like, maybe we don't vibe. It's just, maybe that's how it is. But
yeah, so it's really fun. Also, being a musician myself, I did find quite a bit moments very relatable.
My favorite moment related to being a musician is maybe if I bring my guitar to school, someone will talk to me. I was like, holy shit, I've literally done that.
So stuff like that, and not even just Bocchi, like
For sure, yeah.
like any characters, like again, if you're a musician and you watch Bocchi the Rock, I feel like you will find yourself empathizing and possibly having a flashback to a similar moment in your life throughout this anime, and it's hilarious that it's like that. A third anime that, let alone seasonal, arguably the part I'm watching is not even from the last 2 decades, is Hajime no Ippo. I love this anime. I'm a sucker for it. It's definitely on the more shonen side of boxing animes, unlike, for example, what was it called? Megaloboxing or Ashita no Joe. Like they're much more realistic, or not necessarily realistic, but more seriously toned animes, boxing animes, where this is more like youth, as well as technical, actually, to the sport, which, because of that side of things, I enjoy it a lot. I'm doing a rewatch of it, which will hopefully resolve into me watching the movies and fights that I've not watched back in the day as well, because they're relatively new. And last but not least, which this guy is also a seasonal, and I guess I could say this is my trash-y-ish pick for the season, is Jack of all trades, party of none.
The edgiest title of any anime in recent history. It's definitely edgier, but I was just like, wow. It's not that you told me this. I saw this, and I legit thought about watching it because of how edgy it was. I was like, wow.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually did take that step and started watching it. It's fun. It's whatever.
Yeah.
It's a perfect anime to shut your brain off and just look at the screen and wow, magic, sword, monsters, yay. It's a time filler. It's a good time filler. They're like really bad time fillers, and they're like whatever, okay, time fillers. I feel like it's in that category, but yeah, if you like that sort of thing, it can interest you. It might interest you.
For sure. I should mention, I mentioned previously that I was rewatching Haikyuu with my roommate because I wanted to rewatch Haikyuu and felt a need to watch sports anime after watching Awashi.
Yeah.
But I've also been playing a lot of Slay the Spire 2, which is the reason why I've actually not been watching more anime, is because I've been playing Slay the Spire 2 in my free time. Okay. I sometimes convince myself, I can watch certain anime on my second monitor and play Slay the Spire 2, but then I get really invested into a run and I just get sucked in completely.
That's fun. But yeah, so that's basically everything on my end.
Everything, I think so.
With that, I feel like now we can mention what we're finally watching.
That is
for the next episode.
It is Neon Genesis Evangelion. Woo! Finally. And yes, we are only watching Evangelion next month because we are going to talk about it for quite a long time. I estimate in my head, we are not legally obligated to this at all, but probably like 2.5 hours potentially, because I'm going to be talking about a lot of the details and influences. I'm going to do research that I've done previously, but more so to reinforce these ideas on myself. And but this is just such an important show to me. I would say this is the most important show to me as an artist and one of the most important anime in general. So it just really does need this much time. I think that giving this show anything less than like 2 hours would be really hard to get into all of the nooks and crannies that this show has, because it has a ton of things that you can talk about with it. It's like, there's just so much that you can dig in Evangelion. That's like, when we're talking about layers, like Evangelion is got so many things with it.
Which, for that exact reason, I'll be consuming it for the first time, watching it. Probably will be doing a lot of digging myself as well.
You should be asking me questions
together. Yeah, exactly. Enough content, and then obviously ask you questions off screen time and during our podcast as well, for sure. But I am kind of interested in what I'll feel like like what I'll feel about it. I feel like if I say um, I didn't like it, Jared would just assassinate me in
Yes.
my sleep. But that being said, I am genuinely intrigued about this show slash movie, and I'm kind of excited to dig deep.
Yeah, to make it clear what we are covering, we are going to be covering Neon Genesis Evangelion's episodes 1 through 26. I know some people don't want me to cover 25, 26, but we will be covering them. And then we will also be covering the end of Evangelion. We will not be doing any of the rebuilds. We will not be doing any of the death squared or any of that weird bullshit that is more or less just the same thing rehashed. We will be covering Neon Genesis Evangelion specifically, as well as the end of Evangelion. And it will be, we may at some point cover the rebuilds, but we are going to start with Evangelion, because the foundation, Neon Genesis is the foundation, and end of Evangelion is the punch that sends you home.
So yeah, we're excited. He's excited. I'm excited, and we'll see you on that very intense,
It'll be a long one.
very interesting Neon Genesis episode.
Thanks for watching.
See you.
Like, comment, and subscribe. I should say that. Bye.
See you later.